Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. Time for the bus, time for breakfast, time for another show, all at once. This is not going to be sustainable for a full year. This is really going to have to change in some way. Of course, the teenager, the high schooler insists that everything be done at the last possible second, which is great for him and terrible for me. The idea that he's supposed to leave for the bus around 8:55, but things slip a minute or two and we're still within tolerances. But showing him out the door and getting everything squared away at 8:57, 8:58, and then hurry up, be on the air at 9 o'clock. Well, it's not easy, and it gets in the way of everything. But what can you do? It's actually quite it's a dramatic improvement, I think, for the students to be starting school even a little later than before, and a dramatic turnaround from when the high school used to start earliest. But it's creating problems for podcasters in today's society. And as it was pointed out to me the other day, I really should be, I guess, with that kind of strict schedule. 9 o'clock is not that strict of a schedule, but the live show being very important to the entire operation. It was pointed out to me, actually, you should probably consider yourself, being me, to be more of a live streamer than a podcaster, though it is true that the live stream is recorded for later release as a podcast. I suppose we are primarily live streamers, and the kids know the difference these days. And apparently, I don't know what difference it makes to you or me. You hear it when you hear it, and that was good enough for us when we were kids, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I'm a live streamer. That makes me cool and hip, more so than being a podcaster. Apparently, I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. Here's an interesting question for those of you in the audience. I want to pose this one to you today. Oh yes, Greg says I'm just a blogger on the radio, and that's a good way for us to understand it. But speaking of this whole radio thing, I got an email from a friend from a past life, a former life, when I was working in advertising years ago, before we were doing this. And I guess I was probably certainly by the end of it, I was already involved in the online blogging community. I mean, I've been involved in online communities since forever, so it doesn't, whatever. That doesn't make a difference. That's where the stupid name comes from. Anyway, the contact was from way back when, and I'll protect the anonymity of the person who contacted me by, let's call him, Don Francisco. No, I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, I got a email, the contents of which was very interesting. I won't go into that detail, but here's the part that I'm interested in your help as an audience. So he said to me that, hey, I listened to your podcast and I really like it, which, was difficult enough to believe to begin with. But on top of that, he said that he had been, I assume, on vacation at Martha's Vineyard, of all places, which is hoo-la-la. Okay, terrific, fantastic. It's a nice place. I've never been there. But you know how it is in America, and he manages to get himself to Martha's Vineyard for a nice vacation, and I guess the vacation is ruined in a manner of speaking. But for him, I'm sure a very pleasant experience. It would be great for me. I have a hard time believing it myself, not that he would be in Martha's Vineyard, but that he says he, I guess, met somebody there, talked to somebody there who was also a fan of this show, which is incredible to me because, one, there were two people, right, listening to the show. That's amazing. We know that there's several of you. We know you're out there. It's just difficult to hear you. It's silent in my house. But the stats tell me that there's, 1,500 downloads of the show daily. Sometimes it's a different show. This is an interesting thing to me, too, an interesting phenomenon that people download the show sometimes weeks, months afterwards and listen to it. But okay, that's terrific. We appreciate whenever you listen to it. We put the date in every one of them, so, it doesn't matter to us, doesn't matter to you. Anyway, the point is, okay, so let's say there's 1,500 people then downloading the show, even if they do it on different days. That two of them, one, would talk to one another. That's remarkable all by itself. Two, find each other. Three, do it on Martha's Vineyard, which I guess you would say, well, Eastern liberal establishment elites, of course, they're all gathering to talk about the Kagro in the Morning Show. I just would never have imagined that would be the case. So that seems like an incredible coincidence to me. So what I'm asking is, who was it? Fess up. If you were listening to the show, I don't know whether you're listening while you were on Martha's, if you were ever approached on Martha's Vineyard about listening to this show, I mean, this won't prove it one way or another. And by all means, Don Francisco, I refer directly to you. At this point, Superman, only you can hear this frequency. You would be, you could get away with faking up a new email address and writing and saying, it was me. And I was the one who was speaking to your friend on Martha's Vineyard. And I would probably believe that. So go ahead and do that. I guess while we're at it, you might as well just write to me if you've ever been to Martha's Vineyard. And if you have any suggestions about where we might visit, if we ever go there. We were briefly one time planning maybe we would go to Nantucket and take a look at it. And then we realized that we would lose all our money just staying in hotels there. So at any rate, I guess it's still in the offing, but I'd be very curious to find out. And it would make for a complete story. Not that I don't believe this story entirely, but it sounds like a really amazing coincidence. Because, it's a wide world out there, and with 1,500 people. And as I've mentioned, the show's been downloaded in lots of countries, maybe by accident. I'm not really sure why, but if there are 1,500 people or so listening with some regularity, and some of them are in Canada or the Faroe Islands, as has happened, or Japan, but then they get to, two at a time, to Martha's Vineyard and say something too. Like if you're at Martha's Vineyard, you're probably saying, I don't know, let's have champagne, let's drink wine, let's go to the beach, let's have a picnic, a bike ride around and go shopping or something and eat lobster. Oh, yeah, by the way, podcasts. Let's just approach strangers about podcasts. You wonder how that stuff happens. I'm obsessed with it. That's the topic for the rest of the day. Yeah, there are subpoenas being issued, 40 at a time, to the entirety of Trump world. Yes, we're hearing about arguments about the independent state legislatures theory before the Supreme Court. Yes, war in Ukraine. Yes, pandemic. But I need to find out about Martha's Vineyard. Greg Dworkin is here. He's, thank God he's here to take us off of this subject, unless he's got something to say about Martha's Vineyard. Oh, with doors open to that, go, Greg, if you're interested. Hi.
Well, just because your friend Pierre Delecto happens to hook up with Alan Dershowitz, and that is because Dershowitz doesn't get invited to any cocktail parties anymore, so all he can do is spend the day downloading podcasts.
That could be
that's got nothing to do with anything, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's as likely as the first story, in which two people who aren't Alan Dershowitz meet on Martha's Vineyard. There's no reason it couldn't be Dersh. Not that I think he'd be a fan of the show, but whatever. He could have been just being nice to my friend Don Francisco. I'd love to know how he came up with that one.
Speaking of being nice.
Yes.
I won't be nice. I'll tell you an old joke.
We're just speaking about it. That's all. Yes.
This is such an old joke. It probably dates back to the Romans. All right. So the saying is, and my Latin pronunciation is not that good, but hey, it's a dead language. So like, who's gonna yell at me?
Zombies.
De mortuis nihil nisi bonum.
Right. What?
Which means of the dead, speak nothing but good.
Oh, we just hear it in the opposite.
Yeah. So, the joke goes, Ken Starr is dead.
Oh, yeah, right.
Good.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I did see that news.
Shades of, I'm channeling Oliver Willis. Who every time somebody really bad dies says, look, there is no such rule that says you have 24 hours to be nice. Screw that. They suck.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a big one for too soon comments. Although I will say, just a good lesson in, being a nice person, generally speaking.
Right.
Well, I did see someone retweeting Monica Lewinsky's comment on his passing, which was, look, I obviously am going to have some mixed feelings about Ken Starr, but I don't know, whatever. I've grown as a person enough to know that, look, his family probably misses him, and they don't need to hear from me about this. Basically,
I'm not even talking about the Clinton stuff, which was so long ago nobody remembers except Monica. But
yeah, well,
we have the Baylor situation.
Big in her life.
We have him defending Donald Trump, and then
awful.
we have him defending Jeffrey Epstein. So yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to admit I haven't grown
resume.
As a person as much as Monica Lewinsky has. That's okay. She's apparently a very nice person and who's had a great deal of time to do a great deal of thinking about some major trauma in her life, and she's doing very well. That's good news.
Oh, well, good for her.
As for us, screw Ken Starr. Yeah, right. Good. Really good for everybody.
Good for us.
Fantastic. Yeah, he really amassed a terrible record.
In the meantime, let's start with some politics here.
Oh, now.
We had a primary yesterday, which was of significance.
These are late.
And this is in New Hampshire.
But people are paying attention because it was after Labor Day. So that's good.
So in the U.S. Senate, Don Baldock, General Baldock, beats Morse 37-36. And why is that important?
Landslide.
Because Don Baldock is a right-wing nutjob. And Morse had $5 million of support from Mitch McConnell's super PAC, and John Sununu was supporting him, and he was the so-called moderate in the race. To face off against Maggie Hassan. And the thing is, let me just give you Josh Krasauer's take on this, because it kind of sums up the Beltway thinking. The candidate seen as most electable, including a McCarthy-backed candidate for a House seat, McConnell-aligned candidate for Senate, and two Sununu-backed candidates for Congress, went down to defeat New Hampshire to MAGA-aligned candidates. Ta-da. And this without any endorsement from Trump himself.
No, he didn't even have to do the wink, wink.
Usually, he jumps in the night before when he sees somebody's going to win, but if he doesn't see that they're going to win, he stays out of it so he won't lose. All three races, including a potential majority-making Senate race in New Hampshire, all now look tougher to win for Republicans. Cook Political Report moved 2 out of 3 of those races from toss-up to lean D. The Democrat Pappas in New Hampshire 1 stays a toss-up, but Annie Kuster goes to lean D, and Maggie Hassan goes to lean D. The Democrats also intervened in 2 out of the 3 primaries for the more extreme candidate, came up batting 1,000. To which I would add, look, what happened here is that Republicans chose who they wanted. Yeah. And the idea that somehow Democrats now saying that Morse was terrible, was terribly intervening, and somehow made a difference, whereas the $5 million that McConnell dropped and McCarthy endorsing and Sununu, the very popular governor, endorsing, that made no difference whatsoever. It was all about the Democrats and what minor stuff they did. And so, kind of missing the point there. Republicans wanted MAGA people. They elected MAGA people. They're likely to lose because of it. And as we say about Ken Starr, good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know what to tell you. They love to nominate these people, and there's nothing you can do. You just gotta allow them to screw it up. And if they burn $5 million of Mitch McConnell's money along the way, I can't complain about that.
Yeah, and so they're the usual complaints that everybody always has, because Democrats like to complain, and Republicans like to complain about Democrats. Why are you people sending all that money to Marjorie Taylor Greene's district when you could be supporting, New Hampshire 1, New Hampshire 2? A good point to make, by the way, is that if Democrats can, and I saw this point made online, it's not a unique observation to me. Basically, I stole it from somebody else because I thought it was really smart.
All right.
That if the Democrats, for example, can run a good candidate or at least send your money to support a candidate in the Texas Panhandle,
all right, yes,
then losing that seat, 60-40 instead of 80-20 helps Beto because you bring out people to vote. And so it's going to wind up helping the marquee races statewide. And that's how you pull an upset in Texas. So if you got extra bucks to spend and, you don't want to spend it fighting Blake Masters and you don't want to spend it, fighting Carrie Lake, then send it to not so well-known blue districts or blue candidates in red places where you think that, like, for example, in Georgia, Ralph Warnock might benefit from it.
Yeah.
You can send it directly to Warnock, but don't forget to fund the other people who may also bring out votes in their own area.
That's a good point. It's so good you stole it.
Dave Wasserman says, I've seen enough. Pro-MAGA Don Baldock wins the New Hampshire Senate GOP primary and will face Senator Maggie Hassan in the fall. Lean D for Cook Political. Daniel Dale adds, Baldock said last month he won't budge, damn it, from his declaration that Trump won the 2020 election. Trump lost, of course. Among many other false election claims, he's also said New Hampshire's Republican governor, who opposed him, that would be Sununu, has won races by mathematically impossible margins. But wait, it doesn't stop there. As Jesse Ferguson puts it, too long didn't read on New Hampshire Senate. Who the GOP wanted to run? Popular GOP Governor Sununu. Who the GOP nominated? Don Baldock, who believes Sununu is a Chinese communist sympathizer and a terrorist.
I'll meet him halfway.
Yeah, all right. So I'll meet him halfway and not vote for either one of them.
Right. But, if you wanted to, if you need for me to believe that Sununu is a terrorist, I mean, it hadn't occurred to me, but I'll take your word for it.
So you may have heard Lindsey Graham decided to intervene in what otherwise was a nice, quiet midterm election. And he met with a bunch of right-wing nutjobs, extremists, and said, I have an extreme national bill that I wish to load up and have everybody vote on. Here's the deal. As we'll see in a moment, abortion is driving the 2022 midterms. Republicans want it to be about inflation, but abortion is the issue they didn't see coming and don't know how to deal with. And the memo's gone out.
How could that be?
Quiet it down. Try to put Democrats as the people who want late-term abortions. They define late-term as anything after day one of conception.
Yeah, very late now.
And then, try to neutralize it because otherwise we're getting clobbered. And Lindsey Graham says, good idea. I tell you what, after telling everybody that this is about state-by-state issues, and don't vote against Republicans reflexively because you keep saying that Republicans want a national ban. Let me get together with people who want a national ban and propose that we pass a national ban.
Okay. Go for it.
And everybody looked at him and said, what, are you crazy? Let me give you some of the reactions to that. Republicans, there's a Washington Post, Republicans in muddle on abortion is ban proposed by Graham exposes rifts. It's an absolute disaster, GOP strategist John Thomas said, as Republican Senate nominees already targeted for their comments on abortion were asked to weigh in. Don't forget, these guys are scrubbing their websites of any mention of abortion. Oy vey, he said when informed that Blake Masters in Battleground, Arizona had just expressed his support.
Well, that's not a surprise, but boy, there are a lot of bad candidates. Lindsey Graham's supposed to be better than that, but... Well,
Lindsey Graham is a really terrible politician. And just everybody was digging out the old quotes that he had given various and sundry reporters. Why are you doing this? How did you go from McCain to Trump? And Graham basically said, I want to stay relevant. So, you want to be in the spotlight? Okay, you're in the spotlight. Jerkwad.
Wow.
Political playbook this morning. Did Lindsey Graham just score an own goal on abortion? After the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, most Republicans stuck to a simple message. A decision merely sent the issue back to the states. It's not a prelude to any national ban on abortion. Lindsey Graham tossed all of that out the window Tuesday, dropping a bill that would implement a nationwide ban on abortion. after 15 weeks of pregnancy while allowing states to pass more restrictive laws. Again, keep in mind, this is not a moderate compromise.
No.
It essentially says every red state that has severe restrictions stays. Every blue state that has less severe restrictions must match what he says. So he's taking rights away from blue states, leaving red states alone. The immediate effect was to put fellow Republicans who had already been on their heels over Roe's reversal straight onto their butts.
Yep.
Graham promoted this bill as good policy and good politics, noted it would align U.S. abortion law with the rest of the industrialized world, while giving GOP office holders and candidates a proposal to rally around. Instead, the opposite happened. The GOP scattered in response, while Democrats all over the country began salivating. And basically, that's what happened. So Sarah Posner, who studies religion and reports on it, says the title of Lindsey Graham's abortion ban, the Protecting Pain-Capable Unborn Children from Late-Term Abortion Act, is a messaging mishmash, even as the overall message, ban all abortions, is evident from the circumstances.
Yeah. Does it spell anything?
As Jen Gunther and other good obstetricians have pointed out, fetuses don't feel pain until they're viable. So that's a lie.
No.
And this isn't late-term abortion, so that's a lie.
Okay. There's a couple lies there.
On the one hand, the term late-term abortion, as opposed to the right-wing preferred partial birth abortion, is an attempt to mainstream it. But 15 weeks isn't late-term in any scenario. The pain-capable part is clearly aimed at the base. For years, they've linked abortion bans to claims fetuses experience pain, which they don't. I think also the Senate GOP is nervous about the base because the base is mad that even some Senate GOPers are considering the Respect for Marriage Act, different bill that would codify gay marriage.
Yesterday, yeah. Both
bills have to be viewed together to understand the dynamics here. But the bottom line is that the GOP wants a national abortion ban, knows it needs to propose one to satisfy the base, knows it's deeply unpopular with everybody else, and it's going to mishmash message in hopes of confusing people. Don't be confused. In general, treat stories that claim GOP is tempering its extremism for the midterms with great skepticism.
Okay, look who they're nominating. That should blow it up all by itself.
Regarding the nervousness, the Alliance for Defending something or other, ADF. It's cut off. I can't see what the F is for.
ADS.
Freedom, fetuses, I don't know.
It's for defending
fetishes.
ADSO.
Sends letter to U.S. senators on behalf of over 2,000 church and ministry leaders asking them to firmly oppose the misnamed Respect for Marriage Act.
Okay.
And previously, Sarah had written a story in Talking Points memo. The Christian right fires a warning shot at Senate Republicans, making her point that what they're really trying to do is fire up their base because they're getting clobbered on the abortion issue.
All right. Yeah, that made no sense to me as a strategy, but he went ahead and did it. Best comment I saw was from Scott Imberman, who tweeted. He's an economics professor from Michigan State who made an online meme reference and an old gaming reference saying Mitch McConnell is out here saying nobody is talking about a national abortion ban, and Lindsey Graham says Leroy Jenkins.
That's pretty funny.
I'm going in.
Are you with me?
So, all right, those who get it, get
what
it.
You know. They're sitting here planning. No, I'm just going in.
Woohoo! They had a whole plan. I only came to understand that meme a couple of years ago, and it's like 15 years old apparently. So, but it's a good one. Describes it. If you know, you know, and if you don't, just trust me. It's good.
Yeah, it's funny. Like calling it in via payphone is funny. I guess you have to be a certain age. But in trying to balance his party's competing factors, says Annie Carney, Graham risked angering both and giving Democrats a new opening to paint Republicans as extremist weeks before the midterm elections. As a matter of fact, that's all everybody was talking about after the inflation news in the morning. Graham says this, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about Graham. Good job.
Okay.
Graham's abortion ban stunned Senate GOP. His past less conservative pitch won him some Democrat votes, but most Republicans, they did say Democratic, but most Republicans stiff-armed him Tuesday as they face abortion rights backers ascendant after Roe's reversal. And there's so much going on there. I just want to give you a taste of that. And in order to do that, I have to find Tom Bonier's thread here. This is
right.
good. In case you missed it from last night, we have the vote history from Kansas primary showing us who cast a ballot in that pivotal election, delivering 19-point margin for the pro-choice position. And here are some additional stats. And he's treating it as if it's a midterm referendum, a midterm election.
Okay, yes, right.
Okay. It's as if it's a primary, because essentially in Kansas, that's basically the turnout. Turnout in the Kansas election set records for a midterm primary, with the total turnout exceeding 80% of the 2018 general election.
Okay.
2018 general election as a baseline, 80% compared to that turned out.
For a primary.
For a real midterm general election, this primary, this referendum, 80% of those who turned out in the 2018 general election turned out for this. Mm-hmm. Women turned out at a rate of 89% of their 2018 general turnout. Men turned out 78.
All right. Whoops. Wow. Things are loud today.
That's loud. So while women accounted for 56% of ballots,
yes,
for just those voters who registered in Kansas after Dobbs, the number was women accounted for 64%. And to give you a sense of just how high the turnout was, more women voted in this August primary election than men in Kansas have voted in any midterm general election ever.
Well, there you go. You're
Tons of people turned out. And so thank you, Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, he hadn't even done that yet. Now he has, and it's that much worse. Wow. Well, it was a huge blunder. I don't know whether he consulted with anybody.
Even more numbers from Kansas to
cool. All right, I'd love to hear
that blunder after the break.
All right. Well, we'll do that. Yeah, Mitch McConnell's got to be feeling pretty terrible just in terms of he's being undermined at every turn. Rick Scott stealing all the money. Leroy Jenkins proposing new not ballot initiatives, but new legislation. He's lost control. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're back. We had a nice, we did the rest of the show while you were gone in the commercial break, but we were in the middle of Kansas. There was important data to be understood from Kansas. Is that right?
Yeah, well, okay. Right. So what's the matter with Kansas? Well, more voters under the age of 30 voted in this Kansas primary in August than have ever voted in any midterm general.
That is horrible, or better than ever.
Tom Bonnier, looking at the data, says, I can't overstate how unusual this is. The youth vote in 2018 was high. That was a general election. This was higher.
All right.
Here's another shocker.
They're awake.
60% of the voters under the age of 30 were women.
Well. What are they generally?
Right. On top of that, 9% of the voters under 30 were Latino. Compare that to 3% of all voters in Kansas.
Oh, okay.
Bottom line, the vote to protect a woman's right to choose in Kansas brought out a winning coalition comprised of women, younger voters, voters of color, crossover Republicans, and Latinos, all at record levels. Dobbs has radically changed that election. And if I'm not mistaken, and this would make sense simply based on the number, I read somewhere else but can't find the reference now. So take it on advisement that I read this and my memory could be wrong. But I think the majority of voters were Republicans, which would make sense in Kansas because Kansas is a Republican state.
Yeah.
And yet we had these results.
Yeah, nothing to
So Lindsey Graham, of course, is well aware of this, and with his political acumen just sharpened to a incredible point, he dove right in.
All right. Well done.
Right? Other polling around
the
country is sort of interesting. I suppose, I'm from Connecticut. I want to throw this in, even though it's not tremendously important, but gives you an idea about red waves and lack of same. My district tends to be like 55-45 Democrat, but not solidly for a long time. As I lived here, I was represented by the odious Nancy Johnson Republican, replaced by Chris Murphy, and then, replaced by, others. So it's a district that's gone back and forth. And right now, Jahana Hayes is representing us and likely to win, but nothing is certain. So when I look at Connecticut, this isn't a Hawaii situation where Republicans have no chance. We've had Republican governors in my tenure here. Yeah. So Dick Blumenthal holds a 13-point lead over Leora Levy in the latest Emerson College poll.
All right.
And Leora Levy is a right-wing nut job. And Blumenthal's at 48. She's at 36. Someone else 4.7. Undecided 10%. Blumenthal will win. And yesterday, that same poll, Emerson had an 11-point lead for Ned Lamont over Bob Stefanowski. We've been talking on the show about how Stefanowski went hard right, and it turns out it's not helping him. And, that's part of the deal.
Wrong turn.
Texas Political Project has a poll in Texas. Remember, I was talking about how if you get people to come out in the Panhandle and other conservative areas to, support local Democratic candidates, that may help Beto overall. Greg Abbott has a 5-point lead. Ken Paxton has a 5-point lead. Mm-hmm. Dan Patrick has a 7-point lead. These are, I can see how I could possibly catch up, even though I continue to trail.
Yeah.
Abbott's only at 45. He's an incumbent. He's below the magic 50 mark.
Okay. We'll hope
right, so don't lose hope.
For him.
If you send money to Texas for Beto, I won't yell at you. Just don't bother sending money to Marjorie Taylor Greene's opposition. Send it elsewhere.
Yes, well.
Pennsylvania midterm. Economy, abortion shape Pennsylvania midterm races. CBS News Battleground Tracker out this morning. Fetterman 52, Oz 47. Note that Fetterman is above the 50% mark. Magic. When they talk about politics, they say what they really believe. Fetterman, 57%. Think voters want to hear 43. For Oz, really believe it. Oz, 29%. Think voters want to hear 71.
Yeah, he's pretty transparent.
Has Oz been in Pennsylvania long enough to understand the issues? Among registered voters, 33% say yes, 67% say no. Do they have the right experience? Among registered voters, 56% say Fetterman does, 24% say Oz does. Beyond the top line numbers, it's just hard to see how Oz wins with this sort of stuff.
Okay. I hope that he does not.
Right. How they handle themselves personally, Fetterman, like 50, dislike 50. Mehmet Oz, like 36, dislike 64.
That's bad.
And the main reason for vote choice among likely voters, Fetterman voters, I like them, 56%. Oz voters to oppose the other candidate, 54%.
Yeah, there's not much there for Republicans.
Right. Do they represent change among registered voters? John Fetterman does, 58. Mehmet Oz does, 42. Is Fetterman healthy enough to serve, which is Oz's latest, I can't run on anything else, I better run on this. 59% say yes, 41% say no. Any buyer's remorse for the GOP? 64% wish somebody different were nominated among Republican registered voters. Among Democrats, 77% glad we nominated Fetterman.
Okay.
And enthusiasm.
Hey, right, wait, there's a...
Enthusiasm.
That's the one. Got it.
There's that pregnant pause. Enthusiasm about voting for likely voters. John Fetterman, very enthusiastic, 63. Mehmet Oz, 36.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Of those who say the economy is very important, 57% vote for Oz. And very important issues include economy, the inflation, crime, election issues, guns, and abortion. Higher prices have been a hardship. Overturning of Roe v. Wade makes you more likely to vote, 55% for Democrats and 15% for Republicans. And if you think abortion's important, 70% vote for Fetterman.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there's also data in here somewhere buried about Josh Shapiro. And, vote for governor, likely voters, 55% Shapiro, 44% Mastriano. So that's an 11-point lead when Fetterman has a 5-point lead. But again, at 55, it's a pretty good number for Shapiro. And 84% glad he was nominated. So this is likely Democratic territory. This one is a Winthrop poll. Current findings of a Southern Focus survey of southern states: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and a reminder back in the day when it was the capital.
Yes.
Virginia.
Right. Yes.
It's a southern state.
That's southern. There's,
it may be a bluish-purple state, but it's a southern state.
Yeah. It's true.
And, that's how George Allen was senator. So 3/4 of residents in the 11 southern states, 3/4, believe a woman should be able to obtain a legal abortion if the pregnancy threatens a woman's life or health, according to the latest Southern Focus survey.
Yeah, you just got to.
So if you're running on a complete total ban, anathema to Southern voters. Just so you know.
Okay. I mean, now, that's what they say.
If the pregnancy was the result of rape, 3/4 of respondents said the woman should be able to decide. Republican support was 65%, while Democrat support was 85%. Okay. If the pregnancy threatens a woman's life or health, 77% said the woman should be able to obtain a legal abortion, 71% of Republicans, 85% of Democrats. If the baby's going to be born with severe disabilities or health problems, it's still at least half of the group surveyed. So the idea that Southern voters won't support anything in regarding to abortion that's otherwise extreme, or that Southern voters will only go for this block everything kind of thing that Lindsey Graham is trying to do. It's simply not true.
Well, it turns out there's normal people and women everywhere.
So how do Democrats react to the fact that abortion is on the ballot and that the extremists are being nominated by the Republican Party? Punchbowl interviewed the top 3 House Democrats yesterday. Far from being concerned about the environment, Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn all say they'll keep the House, and Pelosi says Democrats will pick up seats. Yes, you heard that right.
Okay. Wow. That would be something.
That would be something. It's not impossible. I mean, I get that the current environment is, the polls are probably under-reading white Republican voters, and so don't believe what you hear. But then again, there's Kansas. There's the results of the specials, and all of that is important. And so that's my lead in to this story yesterday from Nate Cohen in the New York Times in the Upshot, why things may really be different for this midterm election.
Oh, okay, yes.
This cycle, the arguments for Democratic strength cut against the conventional wisdom that the party in power struggles. The party in power struggles.
Oh, okay, all right.
In midterms. Got to get that fly off my computer that looked like it was a little
Is it one of those moths you're supposed to kill?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Now it looks like a blot on the country, but that's okay. I'll read through it. So the idea is, the polls might be wrong because polls suck, but just about every election cycle, there's an argument for why this time things might be different. No. And the arguments are often pretty plausible. And there's always a way to spin up a rationale for why old rules won't apply. And in the end, history usually prevails. But this cycle, there really is something different, or at the very least, there's something different about the reasons this cycle might be different.
Oh, okay.
This cycle, the arguments for Democratic strength cut at the heart of the underlying theories for why parties in power struggle in midterms. And so you can't blow them off. If there's a saying that captures why midterms go so poorly for the president's party, it's the idea that midterms are a referendum, not a choice. If it's a referendum, Democrats are in trouble, inflation and, Biden. But this year, there's pretty good reason to think this won't just be a referendum because Donald Trump. Trump still earns more Google search interest than Biden. It's nothing like prior midterms when the attention was focused all but exclusively on the president. Google's search interest is a rough proxy for something that's hard to dispute. Trump looms over this campaign in countless ways. The emergence of democracy is one of the more important issues, is almost entirely a function of his presence. Mr. Trump doesn't just make it harder for Republicans to make the midterms into a referendum. He's made it less likely Republican candidates will even try. So the electorate's instinct to check and balance the president is another underlying explanation for the midterm penalty, the thermostatic reaction. If the president is blue, then you want red. If the president is red, you want blue. So in this account, presidents don't simply lose because it's a referendum. They lose because a crucial segment of the public wants to moderate the direction of public policy. It's related to the idea that public opinion is something like a thermostat in which the public moves to turn down the heat when policy runs too hot in either direction. The theory helps explain why some of the worst midterm drubbings come after a president pushes an ambitious agenda. The Great Society, Bill Clinton's healthcare push, Affordable Care Act, and explains why presidents with less ambitious plans, like Jimmy Carter or H.W. Bush, have sometimes avoided a rout. But this cycle, it's the Republicans who achieved one of the most important policy objectives when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and fulfilled a half-century-long political goal of the conservative movement, which is, of course, why I keep referring it to Roe rather than Dobbs. It'll take another 20 years for me to think about Dobbs.
Right. Dobbs
I can't think of an equivalent precedent for anything like this. If you can, email me. Either way, we're experiencing something very different from the usual midterm election. That's true. See Kansas.
Yeah. You know, what struck me as you were reading through that was the two examples where I guess routes were avoided was with the more moderate agenda, and you mentioned Carter and George H.W. Bush, and then I was like, you know, what strikes me about the two of them is
they both
one-termers. I mean, it's great for your midterm, but then it was like, you know how we can balance this now? Get rid of the president. That's a great reaction. So, you know, that might be driving things a little bit. I don't know whether anybody's real. Everybody still seems to think they should be cautious about things, and yet the truth is, presidents, I don't know, they get excited. They win the presidency and say, "I've meant to do something with this. That's the whole reason I started." So then they do it, and all right. Well, interesting, to say the least.
To say the least.
But you're supposed to say more than the least. So.
Okay. Well, I got a couple of other things to say.
All right. Fair enough.
So, you know, that's the election stuff. Then, of course, we get to all the subpoenas and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I have to, you know, add this David Frum tweet, which I have in the pundit roundup, now that the Daily Kos is back up.
Oh, yes. You can all look now.
Story of today was Senator Graham thinking, this 2022 election is not going too well for GOP Senate candidates. I know. Let's make it a referendum on a national abortion ban.
Yep.
Followed by two. All of the other GOP senators sitting on him and putting a silencing bag over his head.
Well, putting a bag over his head is a great
reacted.
idea. Yeah. Well, I mean, good luck with it. It's out now. The Lindsey is out of the bag.
Right. And again, I may have mentioned this the other day. I'm old, so I don't remember anymore. Of course, as you said at the top of the show, we got 40-some odd subpoenas flying around about January 6th, and the interface between January 6th and everything else.
It's all coming together.
You know, for those of you who say Merrick Garland doesn't do anything, you know, well, that story has to be written out of the season. Yes. You know, the writers, you know, don't really want to go down that storyline, so they killed it off.
Yeah.
The writers are still having a struggle, by the way, between the storyline that polls always undercount Republicans and the Dobbs decision changes everything. They both can't be true at the same time. So they'll have to sort that out somehow before the season finale in November. Right. But nonetheless, they have these 40 subpoenas flying out there.
They're out.
And one of
Phone
them,
seizures.
I mean, they've done such things as taken Mike Lindell's phone while he was at the takeout window at Hardee's.
What was he doing?
You can't make this up.
If you did, you'd probably pick the wrong fast food restaurant.
This is like one of those Mad Libs thing where you put Mike Lindell was picked
Pillow
up
guy.
at A, and then you have to put the restaurant in.
Right. And I mean, it's funny because you'd be thinking of maybe, GOP mega donor, he's at the L'Auberge Chez Francois. No, well, they don't have a drive-through, one thing, but for another.
Or Shea McDonald.
Yeah, right. Or maybe he's making a political statement and going to Chick-fil-A or something. I don't know. But no, Hardee's.
No, Hardee's.
Wow.
So among others, one of the other phones that was picked up was a fellow named Mike Roman.
Yes. Yes, we figured out who that guy was yesterday.
Right. So Mike Roman passed the names to a House GOP aide in a bid to get them to then Vice President Mike Pence. People familiar with the episode, though, Politico back in July.
The fake electors.
And so, that is actually coming to a head, and that's sort of important. At the same time, AP had a story yesterday. Trump's PAC faces scrutiny amid intensifying legal probes. So it's not just the fake elector thing. It's the scammed money for the inaugural and other things like it. The massive pile of money is also emerging as a potential vulnerability as chief fundraising vehicle Save America PAC is under new legal scrutiny after the Justice Department issued a round of grand jury subpoenas that sought information about the Political Action Committee's fundraising practices. So this sounds like a Trump Stakes, Trump University, Trump you name it kind of scam.
They're all scams, obviously, but yes.
The scope of the probe is unclear. Grand jury subpoenas and search warrants issued by the Justice Department in recent days were related to numerous topics, including Trump's PAC, according to people familiar with the matter.
Right.
The subpoenas, now, when people familiar with the matter doesn't mean the Justice Department is leaking. The thing with Mike Lindell and his Hardee's adventure, he got picked up by the FBI. They took his phone. He didn't like it. He was handed, which he held up in his video rant about this, a piece of paper from the FBI said, please don't tell anybody. And he got on this video and said, they just intercepted me at a Hardee's. They took my phone. This is terrible. And he holds up the piece of paper and said, they told me not to tell anybody. Well, the hell with that. I'm telling you right now.
Wow.
Which, by the way, would, I guess, open you up for other issues.
Maybe, I guess, if it was a serious thing, I don't know. I mean, honestly, at this point, if I'm at the DOJ, I'd be handing out papers that say that so that I would be able to save money on press releases. Because
I would
they
hand them out, knowing that they'd say something.
Right,
so
exactly.
You got extra stuff to charge people with.
Instead,
but I'm not a lawyer.
Could be that. Yeah, I don't know what they charge them with, and if they get extra charges, great.
Interfering with a government probe,
But I mean, if you get arrested, I don't know how much power they have to tell you not to say anything about having been arrested or having your phone seized.
Well, anyway, the point is when this stuff gets leaked, it's leaked by people like Lindell. It's not leaked by the Justice Department. So the judge in Florida is saying, well, doesn't your side leak? This is why we have to do this for fairness, is a crock.
Yeah. I mean, people familiar with the situation now includes people at the drive-through window at Hardee's.
Yeah.
So
everybody saw it.
He's familiar with the situation. He was an eyewitness to it. Why can't he talk?
The FBI says, give me your phone. And then the little squawky speaker says, and would you like fries with that?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And Lindell says yes, and so everybody knows.
His phone was seized, according to someone familiar with the situation, who also did not want to be identified, but added that he did not want fries with it. Are you sure? Okay. I mean, right. It's the Justice Department or Hardee's. Could have been either.
The subpoenas seek records as well as testimony and ask at least some of the recipients about their knowledge of efforts to engage in election fraud, according to one of the people.
Did you do fraud?
Not according to the Justice Department, according to one of the people.
Right. The fry cook.
Right. Subpoenas also ask for records of communication with Trump-allied lawyers
at the Taco Bell
who supported efforts to overturn the election. So, what was that again? MAGA means make attorneys get attorneys?
Yes, right. That's the popular phrase for it.
The investigation is one of several criminal probes Trump currently faces, including scrutiny of how documents with classified markings wound up at the former president's Mar-a-Lago club. So they work all of that in. Trump spokesman Taylor Budowich slammed the subpoena, saying a weaponized and politicized Justice Department was casting a blind net.
Blind net.
Ah, okay.
Huh. Most nets.
Well,
really
so I guess technically they're trolling.
Maybe, yeah. I no idea. Blindly casting a net, I think, is maybe what he figured. But it's a Trump guy.
Right. So much of the money Trump has amassed was raised in the days and weeks after the 2020 election, which he lost to Biden.
Right.
That's when Trump supporters were bombarded with a nonstop stream of emails and texts, many containing all caps lettering and blatant lies, soliciting cash for an election defense fund. No such fund had ever existed. Instead, Trump's dedicated the money to other uses, like his rallies, paying staff, using the money to travel. Other expenses have been more unusual. There was the $1 million donated last year to the Conservative Partnership Institute, a nonprofit that employs Cleta Mitchell and Mark Meadows, both of whom encouraged Trump's failed attempt to overturn the 2020 election. There's the $650,000 charitable contribution to the Smithsonian Institution to help fund portraits of Trump and the former First Lady. Right? And also some went into Trump's legal expenses fund.
Yeah.
So that's being investigated, I guess, in terms of fraud in the FEC.
Okay, good. Now's the time to do it. I would I think they should maybe just arrest everybody at Hardee's for a single day and see what happens. I mean, most of our
Jennifer
probably
Rubin
January
has a
6th
column.
defendants.
The big takeaway from Trump's legal filings, he has no defense.
Yeah, good. All right.
And this was in terms of Trump saying to the judge in Florida, I guess, that, it's possible that a president can declassify documents and therefore they belong to me. And the Justice Department came back with, well, nowhere in that brief does it say he actually declassified documents.
They won't say that.
Why didn't you ask him about it, Judge?
Yeah. Well, it hasn't gotten to that stage yet, but what is happening is, of course, the submissions have to be signed by attorneys who can be disbarred, sanctioned, and I guess eventually, if they really screw up, arrested if they say stuff that they know isn't true and it will be able to demonstrate isn't true and that they knew wasn't true. So, yeah, they're dancing around the issue. He never declassified anything. He certainly never did any of the work of declassifying anything, and that'll all be provable. And the attorneys know it, and they're unwilling to say it. So they're doing the best they can for their clients.
Because then they'd be lying to the court, and then they get sanctioned.
Right.
So Lawrence Tribe puts it this way: his defense comes down to "I'm President Trump."
Yeah, and that's not even a good defense these days.
It's a terrible defense.
Yeah.
So that's where those things stand.
Excellent. And he's at Hardee's.
Right. And I have to mention this because it just seemed like such a big story. Mississippi Today broke this story. Former Governor Phil Bryant helped Brett Favre secure welfare funding for a volleyball stadium for his daughter. Text reveal. And the texts are amazing. Never before seen text messages. Mississippi Today just did outstanding work here.
All right. I'd like to see those
tried
texts.
to shepherd a proposal to use welfare funds on the construction of a new volleyball stadium for retired NFL player Brett Favre. Project prosecutors have called a scheme to defraud the government. Bryant's previously denied any involvement, which has emerged as the centerpiece of a massive criminal scandal in which prominent officials misspent or stole millions in welfare funds intended for the nation's poorest residents.
Yes. Because we're in a pandemic and
yada,
yada. Right, sure. I did see that story. It broke a little while ago, and we haven't discussed it. I'm thankful that you have brought it up because it's getting considerably worse with each passing day.
Right. And while the state-of-the-art facility represents the single largest known fraudulent purchase within the scheme, according to one of the criminal defendant's plea agreements, the state is not pursuing the matter in its ongoing civil complaint. Current Governor Tate Reeves abruptly fired the attorney bringing the state's case when he tried to subpoena documents related to the volleyball stadium.
Oh.
The messages also showed that a separate $1.1 million welfare contract Favre received to promote the program was simply a way to get more funding to the volleyball project. I could record a few radio spots. Favre tested, what's her name, Nancy New, N-E-W, a friend of Bryant's wife, Deborah, who ran a nonprofit that was in charge of spending. And the text read, "If you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much?" said Favre.
Yes.
Now, this doesn't look at all guilty here.
Right.
No, we never had that information publicized. I understand you being uneasy about that. Let's see what happens on Monday with the conversation with some of the folks at Southern. Maybe it'll click with them. And Favre says, "Okay, thanks. Just got off the phone with Phil Bryant. He's on board with us. We'll get this done." And Brett Favre said, "Awesome. I needed to hear that."
Yeah, I needed to hear that I could hide the source of my money.
Right. So, well, it's not his money. That's the point.
I mean, the money he wanted to
out.
steal.
The way rich people stay rich
Yes.
is they get other people to contribute money for things that they want. They don't ever put their own money into it.
Right. Although there was an effort the initial story that I was hearing was that he was being paid for a series of speeches that he never gave, and then he said, "Oh well, I got caught on that, so I gave that money back, or at least most of it." But they kept digging, and apparently a lot of the money came in the form of special favors for his family, and like I guess his daughter likes playing volleyball, so let's build a stadium for her to play volleyball in, with welfare money that was supposed to help people during the pandemic, but they're poor and brown, and we don't like them. That's it. So, big football hero turns out to be something of a jerk.
The text show that then governor even guided Favre on how to write a funding proposal so it could be accepted by the Mississippi Department of Human Services, even after Bryant ousted the former welfare agency director John Davis for suspected fraud. Right. Then Bryant texted nonprofit founder Nancy New, just left Brett Favre within weeks of Davis' departure. Can we help him with this project? We should meet soon to see how I can make sure we keep your projects on course.
The big volleyball.
When Favre asked Bryant how the new agency director might affect their plans to fund the volleyball stadium, Bryant said to him, "I'll handle that. Long story, but had to make a change, but I'll call Nancy and see what it'll take."
Okay.
I mean, none of this sounds like he's guilty or anything.
No, not at all. I wonder if they justified it during this whole thing. Like, well, people who would have gotten welfare can now work at the volleyball stadium serving, hot dogs and beer.
Yeah.
Or whether they were just, no, let's just steal this money. I don't know which.
Anyway, I thought I should get that story in.
You should.
It seems like a big story, and everything else is going on, and so you get lost there. Yes, Ukraine is happening, and yes, it's a big deal, and the Russians really have issues, and Putin's going to be under increasing pressure, and stuff will happen, and then we'll be back tomorrow to talk about it.
Okay. Well, thank God it's Thursday tomorrow. We very rarely say that, so we're, thank God for every day. Why not? Or Flying Spaghetti Monster if you prefer. Thanks, Greg. I thank you every day that you're here. We'll do it again tomorrow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here at Hardee's. Let's just say, gosh. Well, let's see. There is a lot, but we did fit a lot into the into the first half of the show. Thanks to Greg's quick thinking for bringing up that Brett Favre story. It has been waiting for quite a while, and there's a lot to get to. I don't know how to approach this. Let's see what's in here, and we'll see what makes it out in the course of today's work. Here's another story. This has a Connecticut angle. I thought this might make it into the mix, but it didn't, so I'll cover it. The New York Times, in the people of Katie Benner, Adam Goldman, and Charlie Savage, reporting that John Durham is a gigantic waste of space and time and money. And it appears that the Durham inquiry, do you remember that was even going on, appears to wind down as the grand jury in the case expires. The special counsel appointed by the Trump administration to examine the Russia investigation, Russia, seems to be wrapping up its work with no further charges in store. And guess what? The only charges they brought resulted in an acquittal anyway. So, huge waste of time and money. But I guess John Durham got paid for a while, and I'm sure he's happy about that. When John H. Durham, for hurry up, let's steal some money from the government before my chances run out, was assigned by the Justice Department in 2019 to examine the origins of the investigation into the 2016 Trump campaign's ties to Russia, President Donald J. Trump just shovel some money into a bag and give it to John H. Durham, is what the J stands for. President Donald J. Trump and his supporters expressed a belief that the inquiry would prove that a deep state, scare quote, deep state conspiracy, including top Obama-era officials, had worked to sabotage him. And by the way, once again, I remind you, the likelihood of there being this massive deep state apparatus after Donald Trump personally steals human intelligence related national security information that could compromise the names of active undercover agents for the United States and confidential informants for the United States, plus nuclear information about the nuclear capabilities of our allies, and nobody has, invited him to take a walk out a window somewhere. There's no deep state, guys. It's not happening. It was all a figment of your imagination. Now, as it turns out, Mr. Durham appears to be winding down his 3-year inquiry without anything close to the results Mr. Trump was seeking. Isn't that amazing? In all of his court cases, there has been nothing close to what Mr. Trump was seeking. In all of his legal theories that never made it to court in the first place, there's been nothing close to it. In all his theories about fraud, voter fraud, that either, what happened during whether his election or any other, they never came to fruition. All of his theories about Italian satellites, there's nothing there. All of his theories about voting machines, there's nothing there. It's weird how there's nothing behind his theories but fantasy. And every time they're tested in a court of law where you really have to prove what you're talking about is true, he gets clobbered and his attorneys get in trouble. It's just an odd thing. Like, maybe you guys should stop covering him as though he were a real candidate and entitled to real deference. But okay. Anyway, now Mr. Durham appears to be winding down without anything close to the results Trump was seeking, which I'm sure Trump will just greet with, "I hate John Durham. I never wanted that guy. I never really wanted that guy. It was somebody else's idea. It was kind of forced on me. I have to admit, I was president, a powerful guy. But, look, I can't be responsible for picking everybody. I relied on advisors. They steered me wrong. John Durham is a dud and a jerk. He choked like a dog when I gave him the chance. I gave him all the power in the world to investigate the Russia hoax, and he came up with nothing, like a dog." Anyway. So there, I guess that predicts the future. The real story here, though, the grand jury that Mr. Durham had recently used to hear evidence has expired. So has Ken Starr, by the way. And while he could convene another, I guess look out for that, there are currently no plans to do so. 3 people familiar with the matter said, and only one of them worked at Taco Bell. Mr. Durham and his team are working to complete a final report by the end of the year. They said now he can go look for another job. And one of the lead prosecutors on his team is leaving for a job with a prominent law firm. So he jumped early. That's good. Over the course of his inquiry, Mr. Durham has developed cases against 2 people. 2, count them. It's 2. Accused of lying to the FBI. Fewer people were had charges pressed against them than there are initials in the FBI. Okay? In relation to the outside efforts to investigate purported Trump-Russia ties, but he has not charged any conspiracy or put any high-level officials on trial. Weird, huh? The recent developments suggest that the chances of any more indictments are remote. After Mr. Durham's team completes its report, it will be up to Attorney General Merrick B. Garland to decide whether to make its findings public. And he's been making a lot of things public lately. He'll probably just tell the people at Hardee's and they'll let us know. The report, or put it in a report that says, Mike Lindell, do not tell anybody the results of this report, and then it'll be distributed for free. The report will be Mr. Durham's opportunity to present any evidence or conclusions that challenge the Justice Department's basis for opening the investigation in 2016 into the links between Mr. Trump and Russia. The Justice Department declined to comment. Mr. Durham and his team used a grand jury in Washington to indict Michael Sussman, a prominent cybersecurity lawyer with ties to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Sussman was indicted last year on charges of making a false statement, one charge of making a false statement to the FBI at a meeting in which he shared a tip about potential connections between computers associated with Trump and a Kremlin-linked Russian bank. I guess that was the Alpha Bank server, right? Sussman was acquitted of that charge at trial in May. One charge, one guy, 0 convictions. A grand jury based in the Eastern District of Virginia last year indicted a Russia analyst who had worked with Christopher Steele, the former British spy who was the author of a dossier of rumors and unproven assertions about Mr. Trump, but they were all true. The dossier played no role in the FBI's decision to begin examining the ties between Russia and the Trump campaign. It was used in an application to obtain a warrant to surveil a Trump campaign associate. And by the way, that warrant was signed by the guy who I think is Judge Deary, who might end up being the special master in the Mar-a-Lago espionage case. And that's how you should refer to it. That's what it is. The analyst, though, Igor Danchenko, was accused of lying to federal investigators, and he goes on trial next month in Alexandria, Virginia. So there's still a chance that Durham doesn't come up totally empty-handed on this. In the third case, I didn't even realize there was a third, Mr. Durham's team negotiated a plea deal with an FBI lawyer whom an inspector general had accused of doctoring an email used in preparation for a wiretap renewal application. The plea deal resulted in 0 prison time. Just thought I changed the word no to 0, just to emphasize the fact that, yep, it was 0 prison time. Mr. Trump and his allies have long hoped, they've hoped to lock up Hillary Clinton. They didn't even get close to Hillary Clinton. So what did they say? So one guy got a plea deal in which he didn't get locked up. One guy's going on trial later, and one guy got acquitted. And none of them are Hillary Clinton. Trump and his allies have long hoped that Durham would prosecute former FBI and intelligence officials responsible for the Russia investigation known as Crossfire Hurricane. Mr. Trump has described the investigation as a witch hunt and accused the FBI of spying on his presidential campaign, but has been unable to prove it in any way, shape, or form. Last month, in the days after the FBI obtained a search warrant to seize boxes of classified and other government documents he was keeping at his resort in Florida, Trump used social media to amplify the unsubstantiated idea that Durham had uncovered a vast political conspiracy by the Obama administration and the intelligence community to damage him. Golly, another stupid and unproven theory that won't pan out for anything. I can't hardly believe it. At the same time, the former president seemed to acknowledge a lowering of expectations from indictments to a report. Write her up. And they won't even do that, of course. So, I don't even know what to tell you, but except to say, once again, there's no way you'll ever convince me that this isn't the case, but every Republican accusation is a confession. All the things that he accused everyone else of doing, he's doing himself. That's how he ends up imagining that they're doing it. He's not an inventive guy. Anyway, at the same time, the former president seemed to acknowledge, lowering of expectations from indictment to a report. The public this is Trump. The public is waiting, and he put it in scare quotes here, with bated breath for the Durham report, which should reveal corruption at a level never seen before in our country, Mr. Trump wrote. So even in anticipation of this report, which is by all indications going to be a total dud, that's right, level of corruption never seen before. We've never seen so much time wasted on a level of corruption that didn't exist in a report like this. Although I guess it could be, they'll claim anything. But it could be something like, we think there was a huge conspiracy. We're just not charging anybody, which is just like the Mueller report. I guess there's room for that. Should be prepared for that claim. In May of 2019, Mr. Durham was selected by the Attorney General at the time. You know him, William P. Barr, as in Poobah. Who cares that there's nothing here? Let's appoint the guy, William P. Barr, to review the origins of Crossfire Hurricane, an investigation that was eventually completed by Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel appointed to oversee it. The Mueller report scrutinized numerous links between Trump campaign associates and Russia, but did not find, or was unwilling to say they would find anyway, a criminal conspiracy. Mr. Durham's review eventually evolved into a criminal investigation, allowing him to issue grand jury subpoenas to gather documents and interview witnesses. Shortly before the 2020 election, Mr. Barr made him a special counsel, permitting him to stay in place even after Mr. Trump left office. So you'll continue to get paid if you do our stuff for us. But I kind of ran right past it. When I was comparing what might come out of the Durham report to the Mueller report and saying, I guess it's possible they both say, well, we have scathing things to say. We just were unwilling to recommend any indictments coming out of it. I guess what I thought was interesting here was the way this was phrased. So in May of 2019, Durham is selected by Barr to review the origins of Crossfire Hurricane. An investigation was eventually completed by Robert Mueller, the special counsel. And it occurs to me that perhaps it was Mueller's unwillingness to call a crime and just make a recommendation for a prosecution if he wouldn't do it himself. I mean, Durham did the prosecutions himself that arose from this, and Mueller did a couple, certainly, right? So he could have, but, right, he ran up against, oh my gosh, and as an incumbent president, it's a little more difficult than dealing with a former president in terms of indictments. That's true too. But I'm wondering whether it was Mueller's unwillingness to say clearly in the report, these guys are all criminals and they really need to be prosecuted. I can't prosecute them because, behind it all is a sitting president, and you really need to get him involved in all of this, and all the rest of the prosecutions just don't make sense unless you can eventually indict Trump, but we can't do that now. But I think that might have left the door open. I wonder if he had been more forceful in his conclusions about Trump's criminality, whether the Durham investigation would even be possible. It opened the door for Barr to say, well, if after all this time and all this bother and all this pain and distraction for the president of the United States, well, he's supposed to be working hard, like he was really doing something. There's got to be some criminal conspiracy behind this. Who else would have engineered this enormous distraction for the president if it wasn't, if he was a criminal, then fine. But since he's clearly not, according to my version of the Mueller report, which I was lying about, well, then we have to have an investigation. But I wonder if the Durham investigation is a lot harder to launch if Mueller's conclusions are clearer and stronger. I don't know. But maybe at this point we say, well, the only way to head off yet more investigations is to launch an investigation into the investigation of the investigation. Who appointed Durham and what's important about it? And we should be looking into them. Let's lock up Durham and find out who, or I don't know. I mean, well, why not, right? If Durham won't clearly state that there was some wrongdoing, well, then we're going to have to do it, because as you can see from my example with Mueller, that if you don't indict somebody, it's just opening the door to another investigation. I don't think that's really true, but it's a theory to float. Let's get through the rest of this article so that you know what's going on here. We left off saying Durham's review eventually evolved into a criminal investigation, allowing him to issue grand jury subpoenas and gather documents and interview witnesses. Shortly before the 2020 election, Barr made him a special counsel. That's why he's still around, because he can't fire them very easily. Garland has, of course, met with the Durham team a handful of times, and a top official in the Deputy Attorney General's office regularly checks in with Mr. Durham on the investigation's progress. That must be an interesting job to have, checking in on. Like, okay, we can't fire him. Keep paying. It's a small part of our budget. And then, how you doing over there, John? Yeah? Oh, interesting. One indictment. Oh, you lost? Oh, that's terrible. Well, when are you going to be done? Pretty soon? Early this year, Justice Department leadership asked Mr. Durham to issue a report on his findings in May. That timing slipped, and now Mr. Durham is aiming to submit his report to Mr. Garland after the election, people familiar with the matter said. I don't want to interfere with the election, so I need to get paid for another 6 months. The assignment Mr. Barr gave to Mr. Durham faced difficulties from the beginning. To begin with, The Justice Department's independent Inspector General, Michael E. Horowitz, was already conducting an exhaustive review of Crossfire Hurricane. In late 2019, Mr. Horowitz delivered a report that uncovered significant problems with the FBI's applications for wiretap orders targeting Carter Page, a former Trump campaign advisor with numerous ties to Russia. But it also concluded that the investigation as a whole had a proper legal basis, and that there was no evidence that political bias or improper motivation had led the FBI to open it, which is now, of course, the conclusion of the Durham investigation as well. Or unless he just, I don't know, I guess he could just fill his report with crap and say, who cares? The paychecks are no longer coming, so I don't care if the report is any good or not. I'll give you what you want. Mr. Durham issued an unusual public statement saying, without explanation, that he disagreed with the Inspector General's report and the conclusion that Crossfire Hurricane had been properly opened. Mr. Horowitz later told Congress that Mr. Durham had told him he thought it should have been opened as a preliminary investigation rather than a full one. So that's splitting some hairs. Horowitz's investigation also discovered an FBI lawyer's doctoring of the email used in preparation for a wiretap renewal application. He referred that matter for prosecution, and Mr. Durham's team negotiated the resulting plea deal. So even that was discovered already by Horowitz. In an initial period, Durham seemed to be searching for signs of political bias among FBI officials that Horowitz had already scrutinized, and hunting for wrongdoing among intelligence agencies outside Horowitz's jurisdiction. But those efforts did not result in charges. In 2020, a top prosecutor and longtime confidant of Mr. Durham at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut abruptly quit the team. Although the charges Durham brought against both Sussman and Danchenko last fall were narrow, Durham used the indictments to argue that the FBI was deliberately ignoring information that cut against the idea that Trump and his associates had improperly worked with Russia. Durham's team argued in court that Clinton campaign associates had misled people into thinking that Trump or his campaign associates had colluded with Russia, although it did not charge such a conspiracy. What do you know? They did it, but we're not charging him. Mr. Durham accused Mr. Danchenko of lying to the FBI in ways that made the Steele dossier seem more credible than it was, because it was true. Mr. Horowitz's report, however, showed that the FBI had not opened the Russia investigation on the basis of the Steele dossier anyway, contrary to claims by Mr. Trump's supporters. The coming trial of Mr. Danchenko will give Mr. Durham another opportunity to scrutinize aspects of the FBI's Russia investigation. Andrew DeFilippis, maybe that's how it's pronounced, a prosecutor who played a key role in the Sussman case, has notified the court that he will not take part in the trial of Mr. Danchenko. Mr. DeFilippis, or I don't know, however he says it, has told colleagues he is leaving for a job at the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. Reached at his desk at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan last week, Mr. DeFilippis declined to comment, but then he went to Hardee's. That's the end of the piece. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens next month when the trial of Danchenko opens. Let's see. While I was reading through this, I was thinking about something else that I might wanted to bring up, but appears to have escaped my recollection as I'm reading through this stuff. But anyway, yeah, okay. So that all went nowhere, and it's pretty remarkable what a huge, colossal failure this has been. And all right, it would be a black eye for Trump if it wasn't for the pile of other things that he's getting black eyes about. All right, what other things have I put aside here that are of interest? There are many, and I think that's what jumped to mind, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. But anyway, other interesting stories to try to cram in here. Yeah, that's a Friday thing. Here's a interesting and fun story from election results. I guess I won't read all the way through it, but it sounds like a good story from The Intercept. Just a good news tale, generally. Robert Mackey reports this one, and it's news from Idaho. So, Joan, are you listening? Idaho's far right suffers election loss and that's happening everywhere. That's good news, except in primaries where they're experiencing election wins. But then in a general election, they tend to be losing these things. This election loss is to an 18-year-old climate activist. What is going on here? The subheader tells us the important part of the story. High school senior Shiva Rajbandari won elected office in Boise, defeating an incumbent school board trustee backed by, of course, local extremists, because that's something they have in healthy supply in Idaho, local extremists. But great. A climate activist, I think might even have gotten this, complex looking last name pronounced correctly. Rajbandari. I hope I got it right. Congratulations to Shiva, if I've got the first name right, Shiva. And we would be pronouncing that, Jewish people would pronounce it Shiva, but I guess it's probably Shiva. I was more concerned about the last name at first glance. But anyway, congratulations to this young man in his campaign here. This is terrific. The nationwide campaign to stifle discussions of race and gender in public schools through misinformation and bullying suffered a reversal in Idaho, on Monday, when a high school senior vocally opposed to book bans and smears against LGBTQ plus youth took a seat on the Boise school board. And if you're going to do it anywhere, it's going to be in Boise. That's to be sure. But you got to get up off your ass and do it. And this kid did it. The student, Shiva Rajbandari, was elected to the position by voters in Idaho's capital last week, defeating an incumbent board member who had refused to reject an endorsement from a local extremist group that has harassed students and pushed to censor local libraries. Some of Shiva's tweets are embedded in the story here with pictures of him being sworn in. Very cool. And good news generally. Rajbandari, who turned 18 days before the election, was already well known in the school district as a student organizer on climate, environmental, voting rights, and gun control issues. Got all the right stuff. But in the closing days of the campaign, his opponent, Steve Schmidt, was endorsed by the far-right Idaho Liberty Dogs. Very serious people, obviously, Liberty Dogs. Like a dog, these Liberty Dogs. They choked like a dog, their candidate did, which in response helped Rajbandari win the endorsement of Boise's leading newspaper, the Idaho Statesman. Excellent. Rajbandari, by the way, a third-generation Idahoan, whose father is from Nepal, was elected to a 2-year term with 56% of the vote. So, there you go. Pretty good. That's exciting. In an interview, Rajbandari told The Intercept that although he had hoped people would vote for him rather than against his opponent, that's the usual hope, my campaign was not against Steve Schmidt, he said. He was nonetheless shocked that Schmidt did not immediately reject the far-right group's endorsement. Like maybe he was moderate enough normally to have done that, but he didn't bother this time. I think that that's what the majority of voters took issue with. Oh well, I can't believe that incumbent Republicans stepped into a bear trap and lost a seat that they had held. The Idaho Liberty Dogs, which attacked Rajbandari on Facebook for being pro-masks/vaccines, oh no, and leading protests which created traffic jams and costed, that's sick, they said costed taxpayers money, 2-word taxpayers money, whew, spent the summer agitating to have books removed from the public libraries in Nampa and Meridian, 2 cities in the Boise metro area. We talked about that with Joan, I think, a week before last, about the crazies showing up in the library. So they got shut down too. They elected a kid. Things are all right in Boise. I love it. It's a great story. It's longer than that. There's a lot about this kid that there's yet to learn. It's very exciting. I invite you to go and learn it. I feel bad giving him short shrift, but I wanted to at least bring it to your attention that it was happening, and I'll share that Intercept article with you, and we should all go read about this guy and be proud of him. It's exciting news. It's also, of course, getting close to break time. So we weren't going to get much further with it anyway. Let's see. Other things, I'll just toss this one in here before we run out of here from Truth Out. Let's see. Let me open the original here. Chris Walker, let's see. Yeah, Chris Walker is the writer here. Just an interesting headline anyway. We don't have to go too far in depth with it. January 6th committee member suggests ending electoral college. All right, fine. It's a good idea. It's Jamie Raskin, as you might have guessed if I had given you a chance. And it turns out, well, here's the write-up real quick. A member of the January 6th committee investigating the attack on Congress, you know about all of that, said there should be an examination of whether the Electoral College needs to be just abolished, just straight up. He was on All In with Chris Hayes, the show on MSNBC, on Friday evening, I guess. When he said that lawmakers should make changes to the criminal code in order to, where were we here? Make changes to the criminal code in order to account for now the possibility of presidents just taking a headlong rush at seizing the presidency. Statutes are, of course, already in place to prosecute people who seek to obstruct or interfere with the peaceful transition of power, but now additional laws may be needed to deter attempts to usurp an election result. And yes, we could reform the way we count those votes, or we could just say, these things are dumb, let's get rid of it. Why not? Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, some other housekeeping to clean up. Here's something that I thought I would never do. I'm going to use a Keith Olbermann tweet for something that sounds like it might actually be factual, and backtrack on something we said yesterday, and it makes sense, honestly. So yesterday we spent a little bit of time at the beginning of the show yesterday talking about, hey, we still don't know what the hell Trump is doing in D.C., and I don't even know if he's still here or not. It hasn't risen to my eyes to see that he's left either to go back to Florida or New Jersey or anything, so he may still be here. I still have questions about where he's staying when he's in the D.C. area. It may be nothing nefarious in terms of where he's staying. I think like I said, he owns a townhouse in the development where the golf course is. And you may remember, if you're a longtime listener to the show and you care about such things, or you're maybe from Loudoun County area yourself, that he didn't build the golf course or anything like that. It was already there, and he bought it. It used to be Lowe's Island Golf Club, and it sounds fancy, Lowe's Island, but I don't know if there is a Lowe's Island or not. But if it is, it must be in reference to, there are several, silt islands in the middle of the Potomac River, which are unusable for pretty much anything. Occasional little wooded patches in the middle of the river where the water level gets low. And there's several of them right along the Virginia shoreline. And maybe, nobody uses it for anything. But at any rate, and I guess in this one, they built on it. They built the causeway over the little spillway of water from the Potomac, and maybe this island is more stable, and they actually built the golf course on it, or maybe it's just nearby. It's a fancy name to give it. It was just a regular golf club. It had nothing to do with Trump. Trump didn't build this thing. It wasn't an enactment of a realization of his vision. I saw the beautiful property and I just said, somebody else built it. It was very nice, and then he bought it and slapped his name on it. And anyway, so it was built as a regular golf course, but a little golfing community, upscale, ex-urban community, had a golf course attached to it. You could buy a house, single family or a townhouse nearby, fancy stuff. And I think when he bought the golf course, he bought himself a little, townhouse there. To stay overnight or have a place to shower or something, to not use the facilities there. Anyway, so he might be staying there. Anyhow, the real point of my coming back to this story was that he had that weird meeting out there with like 9, 10, 11 people, and they were all semi-dressed for golf, but there were no golf clubs, right? And everybody was like, what the hell is this mobster meet? What is he? And my own speculation was like, I don't know. Maybe he's decided to meet somewhere where he thinks he can't be recorded. Although I'm pretty sure there's, he owns the property at Trump National. You can sweep for bugs if you really think that there are any in there. On the other hand, I guess I would say, remember that he's Trump, and he should probably assume that sweep is being done incompetently. So maybe he decided, I'm going to meet outside where you'll be able to see me, but you won't be able to hear what I'm talking about. Except that, one of the issues with the picture of everybody without the golf clubs was nobody could tell who the hell it was he was talking to. And there were people like, oh, well, that's Mark Meadows, I think. And so I saw somebody say, I think that's Newt Gingrich. And I looked at the picture, like, none of those guys are Newt Gingrich. I would totally recognize him. I don't know that I would recognize Mark Meadows, quite honestly. And then, maybe that's one of his new lawyers, and that guy over there. Anyway, it turns out the only person I could identify for sure was Eric. And it did strike me at the time, that's not the usual crimey son that he brings with him. Don Jr. is the one who's usually on hand when there's crime to be committed. Or Ivanka would be the one on hand when there's maybe we're trying to do something serious. And we're in trouble and we really want to get out of it. And Trump wants everybody murdered and thrown out the window. What should we do? We'll bring in Ivanka, and she'll tell him, you can't go murdering everybody. That's not good. But Eric, though he's had his problems and he's certainly been party to some of the other Trump schemes in the past, he's not usually the one they bring on hand when they're like, we got to have a serious war council about how to do some more crime. So that should have been a tip-off. Tip-off number 2 was nobody seems to be able to identify anybody else in this group. And, what does that mean? Well, Keith Olbermann had a better theory about it, which I think rings true, which is difficult to say because I think Keith Olbermann is a bit of a jerk. Anyway, I hate to spoil everybody's fun, he says, but clearly the men with Trump at the golf course are not political figures or lawyers. They're his golf course executives. And yeah, that's a better thing. He used to do this crap at his building when I lived there. He used to live in Trump Tower. He points at stuff he wants fixed. It makes him feel big. I mean, all the IDs. That's Hannity. That's Nunes. That's the new lawyer. They're all wrong. One of the guys is Larry Glick, who's like his vice president of golf. Not that the New York Post is a real newspaper, he goes on to say, but Trump holds a mob summit and he's sure to get videotaped flying to it and attending it. I guess that's a good point, although he is incompetent at this stuff. They're doing a golf. He says, there's no punctuation. So I don't know whether they're doing a golf meeting. They're doing a golf meeting. Could they be looking for good burial plots? Yes, but it's about golf. And he includes this tweet from Angel D, who says, look, I think as much as I wish this is nefarious, the fact that his director of golf grounds could mean it's a renovation project. One of the people who does look like it might be a correct identification, Brad Enie, E-N-I-E, director of grounds at Trump National Golf Course. So, yeah, that makes a lot more sense that they were out there meeting and Trump was saying, I want to change this, that, or the other thing. And, I doubt whether he had any particular insight into how to make the property better golf-wise. It's probably like, I want to put a gigantic American flag. I want you to dye the grass on this tee to make it look like the presidential seal, and I want you to build a giant replica of the Oval Office over here. It could be, or, maybe one of the few things he really does have insight into is golf hole design. I thought if we put some trees in here and we turn this way and we change the direction of the fairway down here and elevate the green, it could be. Well, that's a much better explanation for that weird group of guys, especially if it turns out that weird group of guys included some people who are very clearly identified with golf operations at this club. On the other hand, somebody did point out in the thread, a lot of people who worked for Trump at the golf courses became his close confidants when he was president. We were just pointing out the other day, one of them, which one was it that we were laughing at it? One of the top names in Trumpdom. And I keep wanting to think it's Dan Bongino, but it isn't. It's the other one. Scavino. Yeah. Who started out with him as somebody said his caddy, but I think probably something different. Maybe just a glorified caddy, but who started out in golf operations and ended up moving into the Trump organization and then on to the White House. So I guess it's possible that there could still be something nefarious going on, but hey, maybe not. And it does make much more sense, one, that Eric is there. He's not the crimey one. And also, if you change the story to be that, then it's like, well, Trump is leaving his Bedminster, New Jersey golf course to go to Washington, and he hasn't told anybody why he's going. It must be he's embarrassed to say because he's really turning himself in at the DOJ or meeting with somebody secretly at DOJ or something. And it's like, well, if he was really going to Trump National in Virginia to talk to his golf operations guys about how he wanted to do some redecorating or renovation of the golf course, why would he tell anybody where he was going? No one will be interested. It's not public business, and the public would never care anyway, and it's dumb. And of course he wouldn't tell anybody. No one's interested. This would be the one realization, the one time in Trump's life when he realizes that the things he's doing are not particularly important and doesn't say anything about it to anybody. And he's right. So there's a real possibility out there that it had nothing to do with anything. And I certainly never bought into the idea that he's secretly now come to surrender to the DOJ. He's never going to do that. So certainly not secretly anyway. He'd make the biggest stink in the world if he felt he was cornered and he had to do it. So that's the answer to why we don't know what he's doing here. It's because it's unimportant and no one gives a crap. Still, you'd think you'd be able to settle this issue. And I guess he was probably enjoying trolling the media by not telling them, by watching them speculate and say stupid things like we said yesterday. Anyway, there you have it. I thought I would clear that up. Another story that's getting a lot of attention and that deserves some more time on our show, the report by the Washington Post, which really, at a certain level is a duh kind of a story, but we appreciate Missy Ryan's work on it nonetheless. I didn't mean to put it that way. Make it sound like you were working on something unimportant. Russia spent millions on secret global political campaign, U.S. intelligence finds. That's sort of the duh part of it, but okay. Russia has secretly funneled at least, now we have numbers, $300 million to foreign political parties, like the Republicans, and candidates in more than 24 countries, like Ukraine, which, once again, I remind you, is what the discussion was about that day in 2016 when Kevin McCarthy blurted out, I swear to God, I think there's two people Putin pays, Rohrabacher and Trump. Well, now he's vindicated because here's actual figures on the money, although they didn't actually say we have definitively established that Rohrabacher and Trump got that money. But he's vindicated in the way that Mitt Romney was sort of vindicated when he said, our greatest geopolitical threat is Russia. And we all laughed because we weren't really quite aware of what Russia was actually up to. And we thought maybe China or Iran or ISIS or something like it was our true biggest problem, or other terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, etc. But he turned out to be right. And later on, now he's running around saying he's vindicated, but he's still not really ever hit the mark. Like, okay, our biggest geopolitical foe is Russia. And now we found out what they're doing. They're funding your political party. Look the other direction. I mean, I'll vote to convict the president for launching an insurrection, but to no avail. And otherwise, I'm going to do nothing to try to root out this corruption, which, by my own theory, I should be readily willing to admit is true and dangerous. But because it involves my party, I don't care anymore. Similarly, I think we'll see the same thing happen for Kevin McCarthy. Anyway, Russia has secretly funneled at least $300 million to foreign political parties and candidates in more than 24 countries since 2014 in an attempt to shape political events beyond its borders, according to a new U.S. intelligence review. And according to what the then Ukrainian prime minister came all the way to Washington, D.C. to tell Republican leadership, including Kevin McCarthy. Way back when. Moscow planned to spend hundreds of millions of dollars more as a part of its covert campaign to weaken democratic systems and promote global political forces seen as aligned with Kremlin interests, according to the review, which the Biden administration commissioned this summer. A senior U.S. official who, like other officials, spoke to reporters Tuesday on a condition of anonymity, said the administration decided to classify some of the review's findings don't take them to Mar-a-Lago. In an attempt to counter Russia's ability to sway political systems in countries in Europe, Africa, and elsewhere. By shining this light on Russian covert political financing and Russian attempts to undermine democratic processes, we're putting these foreign parties and candidates on notice that if they accept Russian money secretly, we can and will expose it, the official said. Countries where such activities were identified included Albania, Montenegro, Madagascar, and potentially Ecuador, according to an administration source familiar with the matter. Officials pointed at one Asian country, which they declined to name, where they said the Russian ambassador gave millions of dollars in cash to a presidential candidate. I wonder if that was the Philippines. They said that Kremlin-linked forces have also used shell companies, think tanks, and other means to influence political events, sometimes to the benefit of far-right groups, like the Republican Party in the United States of America. The senior official said the U.S. government detected an uptick in Russian covert political financing in 2014. The review did not address Russian activities within the United States, because that's too ticklish and sensitive. But they really ought to do such a report because, as I was saying to Greg, it's pretty interesting that Mitch McConnell has completely lost control of the House or the Senate Republican conference and his ability to direct things. Rick Scott is undermining him on elections and stealing all the money. And who else were we talking about earlier? Lindsey Graham just sort of freelancing it on policy right in advance of the election and changing the direction of Republican approaches to the Senate campaigns that are critical to their efforts, all in contravention to the way McConnell would have directed these things. And, I mean, McConnell should want to know, and I guess Mitt Romney should want to know, was he right? McConnell will want to know, why are all of these Republicans going off in different directions, and why are they doing every time they undermine me, it's in service of a slate of candidates that's damaging to the Republican Party. For starters, that'll be his first worry, but also undermine Americans' faith in democracy in an attempt to use that to win election. As a senator who I will not be able to wrangle or exercise any political control or even offer direction to, and who will get here and will go rogue and go maverick on me and continue to undermine Americans' trust in elections. That should be of major concern to Republicans. But apparently, I guess they painted themselves into a corner by saying in 2016, Russian interference inures to our benefit. Republican candidates will win because of it. And only now are they realizing what kind of Republican candidates are going to win. And of course, now it looks like Republican candidates won't win because they're nominating lunatics of the sort who just happen to be carrying water for the Russian agenda, weirdly enough. But now, McConnell finds himself in the position of having to hope that they don't win, because he's got to actually be thinking about that too. Whereas he might have been saying earlier at some point, like in 2016, 2020, he was probably saying, well, I'm not for all the crazy stuff, but we'll win. I'll be majority leader. I can direct the agenda, and we'll do tax cuts and appropriate and interesting culture war stuff. And I'll ride the culture war wave to the tax cut stuff and judiciary appointments that I want, or blocking the appointments of the Biden administration. And it still inures to the benefit of Republicans. And now it no longer does, because he won't be able to control the agenda and may find himself bounced as majority leader anyway. Not that Trump hasn't been perfectly open about that he wants to replace him as majority leader. So, you'd think he'd be concerned, and maybe the time has come to say, I actually don't want to win the majority in the Senate, because it'll be really embarrassing. One, I might get bounced as majority leader, but even if I don't, I'll be hostage to a MAGA conference, and life will just be disastrous from then on. And gee whiz, how did this happen to me? I'm such a savvy player, and I guess the only maybe he would take comfort in the explanation, and Mitt Romney could go along with him on this one. Yeah, it was the Russians, just like I said it was going to be way back when, even though I was talking about, naval power projections, et cetera, et cetera. But I could maybe sneak this one on under the wire and call it a win. All right, so where were we here? The report won't address Russian activities in the United States, but it should. Assessments by both U.S. spy agencies and a bipartisan Senate investigation concluded that Russia, under President Vladimir Putin, launched a campaign to interfere in the 2016 presidential election to assist then-candidate Donald Trump. The publication of details about the Kremlin's alleged political influence campaign comes as the United States expands its military support for Ukraine in its war against Russia, now in its 7th month. And again, I remind you that this worry about Russian interference in American politics and in Western and democratic politics, small d, around the world was the true subject of the conversation that day that McCarthy blurted out, I think Putin pays Trump, and also Rohrabacher, because the Ukrainian prime minister was in town to tell them that's what's going on. And they opted to stay silent because they thought it would inure to the benefit of Republicans in the United States. And I guess they just didn't believe or care what was really going on, I guess. I guess they didn't care, because the rest of the participants in that conversation said, yeah, it's terrible what's happening. It's maniacal. The Ukrainians are fighting for their very lives there. And this is going to spread throughout Europe and move west. And it might even be happening already in the United States. But we better keep our mouths shut, because short term it might mean some tax cuts as Republicans take over control of Congress and the White House. And now, gosh, it's come back to bite you in the ass. And now you're sorry. All right. Well, anyway, but basically what it comes down to there is McCarthy ignores the whole thing. At Paul Ryan's behest. But not only do they ignore it at Ryan's behest, but McCarthy never gets it in the first place. He's interested in the money, and I guess maybe wondering, why am I not getting paid by Putin? Since if we're going to decide that this all is fine and inures to the benefit of Republicans, when am I going to start getting some of this Putin money? Because obviously it's not troubling anybody else. But he misses the whole point in terms of future geopolitics. And now we find Ukraine mired in this war, which thankfully they're turning the corner on. But if you ever would have had to ask the question, who lost Ukraine, the answer would have to be Kevin McCarthy. Ukraine came to the United States and explained what was going on. Others in the Republican Party got it, but chose to ignore it for political reasons. McCarthy ignored it because there was no other choice. He didn't get it in the first place. Anyway, since early this year, the White House has taken the unusual step of repeatedly releasing declassified intelligence related to Moscow's intentions and actions related to Ukraine, part of an attempt to push back on Putin's ambitions there and counteract what U.S. officials have described as Russian disinformation operations. A State Department, démarche, is that how you would say it? Monday, to U.S. embassies in more than 100 countries, described the alleged Russian activities and suggested steps the United States and its allies can take to push back, including sanctions, travel bans, or the expulsion of suspected Russian spies involved in political financing activities. The cable, which officials provided to reporters, said that Russian political financing was something overseen by Russian government officials and legislators and had been executed by bodies including Russia's Federal Security Service. The démarche, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, also named Russian oligarchs it said were involved in financing schemes, including Yevgeny Prigozhin and Alexander Babakov. I don't think we've run into him before. Prigozhin, known as Putin's chef, I remember that, after making vast sums in Russian government catering contracts, was charged by U.S. officials in 2018 with attempting to interfere in the 2016 elections. He has been linked to private military firm Wagner and is wanted by the FBI. Babakov, I don't know, is a Russian lawmaker allegedly involved in financing a far-right party in France. Ah, yes. Was it Marine Le Pen and her gang who are pretty openly accepting Russian cash? Moscow has used cryptocurrency, cash, and gifts to shape political events in other countries, often employing accounts and resources of Russian embassies to do so, the cable said. In the coming months, Russia may increasingly rely on its covert influence toolkit, including covert political financing in Central and South America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia in an attempt to undermine the efficacy of international sanctions and maintain its influence in these regions amid its ongoing war in Ukraine, it said. And by the way, Central, South America, Africa, Middle East, and Asia, but we're not going to talk about things going on in the United States. That's North America. That's pretty much every continent on the face of the earth minus Antarctica, where there's nothing going on. And no mention, though, of Australia. So I guess that's good news for them. U.S. diplomats are briefing counterparts in other countries about the activities, which American officials believe could go far beyond the nations and sums that have been identified. So maybe Australia could be in there. It's definitely happening here. We think this is just the tip of the iceberg, senior officials said, or one anyway said. So rather than sit on the sidelines, we are sharing these response measures. U.S. officials are also asking partner nations to share their own information about Russian financing to help the U.S. government attain a fuller picture of what Russia is doing. While the review did not address Russian influence efforts in the United States, the senior official acknowledged that the issue remains a major challenge requiring continued work to safeguard the U.S. political system and elections. There's no question that we have this vulnerability as well, the official said. So, look out. All right. Winding down here with very little time left to squeeze in any other stories, but there are others. Maybe we'll return to this subject tomorrow. As I see, there's a CNN article here just saying that the here's the headline. Justice Department criminal investigation now touches on nearly all efforts to overturn the 2020 election for Trump, sort of bringing all the various approaches that he and his people took under the one umbrella and unifying it into one, what could potentially be one giant case. On that front, but on a smaller scale, I'll read you this Hill article. We may have time to deal with this. Judge rejects Navarro request to investigate contempt charge. Just a little bit of the legal wrangling finally resolving itself in one area. Julia Shapiro reporting for The Hill. A federal judge on Monday rejected former Trump aide Peter Navarro's request to do what? To investigate his indictment for contempt of Congress. Oh, you're going to indict me and you're going to let that stand? I think we should investigate that. This is like a mini Durham investigation. You indicted me for contempt of Congress. I think that it was politically motivated. We should have an investigation. Navarro, who was indicted on 2 counts of contempt for refusing to comply with a subpoena from the House January 6th Select Committee, claimed that his prosecution was politically motivated and he sought documents from the Department of Justice, according to court filings. The former Trump aide argued that he was selectively prosecuted. So what? Sorry, that's the way it works. And the Justice Department's decision to charge him was tainted with unlawful political interference, pointing to its decision not to prosecute former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and former Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino for contempt. What about that, eh? Well, that's prosecutorial discretion, and it doesn't really help you in any way. And once again, all of your accusations are confessions because, as it turns out, as we learned in an article the other day, yes, now emerging evidence of drastic efforts at politicizing the Department of Justice under Trump. Oh, well, District Judge Amit P. Mehta, he's handling almost everything these days, rejected Navarro's claims, noting that Meadows' and Scavino's cases were materially different. Meadows and Scavino were both expressly directed by former President Trump not to comply with subpoenas from the committee investigating January 6th riot, and had extensive communications with the committee on the issue, with Meadows turning over thousands of pages of text messages. Navarro did not receive any specific requests from Trump and made no apparent effort to accommodate the committee, communicating with the committee over a 3-week period, largely through terse emails and public statements, Mehta said. Mehta also noted that the Justice Department's decision not to prosecute Meadows and Scavino weakens Navarro's claims of politically motivated animus. For instance, Navarro claimed that a public statement from President Biden, in which he said he believes people who denied the committee's subpoenas should be prosecuted, showed political interference. However, Mehta rejected this, saying it cannot be that the president's public statement was so influential that it gave rise to defendant's prosecution, but not a prosecution of either Meadows and Scavino. And also, of course, what would be the big problem for the chief law enforcement officer of the United States saying we ought to enforce the law once in a while? That's what he's supposed to be doing. All right. Well, still a million stories we didn't get to. We'll try and get to them tomorrow and later in the week. But you know what? There's a second crack at this as Justice Putnam takes up the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
So he heads in the right direction immediately, noting that more portions of the Mar-a-Lago search warrant affidavit have been unsealed. That's true. Christina Bobb apparently plays a large part in this. Plus, the FBI is investigating a package bomb explosion that injured one person at Northeastern University in Boston. Plus, elsewhere, suspicious packages as well. Stay tuned.